Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the City Planning Commission public meeting. Madam Secretary?
Good
please
morning.
begin.
This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street. Today is Wednesday, June 8, 2016. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones and beepers. All speakers should fill out a speaker's card at the desk outside of Spector Hall. In addition, we ask that those providing testimony please identify yourself, limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and speak clearly into the microphone. I will now call the roll. Chairman Weisbrod.
Here.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Besser. Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Delauss. Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie. Commissioner Efron.
Here.
Commissioner Knight.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of May 25th, 2016.
On the minutes, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, the minutes are approved.
Scheduling. On calendar numbers 1 through 8, we have resolutions for adoption. Scheduling Wednesday, June 22nd, 2016, for a public hearing to be held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street.
On the resolutions, may I have a motion to
So moved.
approve? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The resolutions, Madam Secretary, are approved.
The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 9. Borough of the Bronx, calendar number 9, CD4, N160305PXX, in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 260 East 161st Street. For a favorable report on calendar number 9, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser. Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes, I just want to acknowledge the agency representative from the Office of the City Medical Examiner, just for her thorough explanation of the services that the office provides in helping us to get to today. So with that, yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie. Yes. Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 9. Borough of the Bronx, calendar number 10, CD 10, N160297HKX, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the William H. Schofield House. On the adoption of calendar number 10 for referral to the City Council, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 10 has been adopted. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 11, CD 7, N160298HKK, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the Greenwood Cemetery entrance and chapel. On the adoption of calendar number 11 for referral to the City Council, Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Happy to vote yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 11 has been adopted. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 12, CD 15, N160300HKK, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the Van Sicklen House. On the adoption of calendar number 12 for referral to the City Council. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 12 has been adopted. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 13, CD 6, N160299HKK, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the Park Slope Historic District Extension 2, on the adoption of calendar number 13 for referral to the City Council. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Just want to comment that I know our scope is limited on these referrals, but, so I do vote yes, but I would hope that at the city council level, they look at the carve-out of 184 Sterling Place, which was brought up to the commission's attention prior. So I vote yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Calendar number 13 has been adopted. Borough of Manhattan Calendar number 14, CD7, N160292 HKM, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the St. Michael's Episcopal Church Parish House and Rectory, on the adoption of calendar number 14 for referral to the City Council. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 14 has been adopted. Borough of Manhattan Calendar number 15, CD2 N160293 HKM, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the 57 Sullivan Street House, on the adoption of calendar number 15 for referral to the City Council. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 15 has been adopted. Borough of Manhattan Calendar number 16, CD1 N160303 PXM, in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 55 Chambers Street. For a favorable report on calendar number 16, Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 16. Borough of Manhattan calendar number 17, CD5, N160182 ZAM, in the matter of an application for the grant of an authorization concerning 7 East 19th Street for adoption on calendar number 17. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Efron,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 17 has been adopted. Borough of Queens, calendar number 18, CD11, N160295 HKQ, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the John Williams and Linda Bell Ailes House, on the adoption of calendar number 18 for referral to the City Council. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 18 has been adopted. Borough of Queens, calendar number 19, CD2 N160294 HKQ, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the Pepsi-Cola sign, on the adoption of calendar number 19 for referral to the City Council. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Efron,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 19 has been adopted. Borough of Queens, calendar number 20, CD6, N160304 PXQ, in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 118-35 Queens Boulevard, for a favorable report on calendar number 20. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 20. Excuse me. Excuse me. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 21. Excuse me. CD2 N160296, HKR, in the matter of a communication regarding the landmark designation of the Vanderbilt Mausoleum on the adoption of calendar number 21 for referral to the City Council. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser, Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
excuse me, Commissioner De La Us,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Fran,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 21 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar numbers 22 and 23. Calendar number 22, CD1 N160019 ZAR. Calendar number 23 N160020 ZCR, in the matter of application for the grant of an authorization and a certification concerning 30 Cunard Avenue for adoption on calendar numbers 22 and 23. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Fran,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar numbers 22 and 23 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 24, CD3, N160235 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 165 Pleasant Plains Avenue for adoption on calendar number 24. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Fran,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 24 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 25, CD3, N160230 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 334, 338, and 342 Manhattan Street for adoption on calendar number 25. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Fran,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 25 has been adopted. Excuse me. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 26, CD3 N160201 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 115 Macon Avenue for adoption on calendar number 26. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Fran,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 26 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 27, CD3, N160228 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 22, excuse me, 22 Masons Boulevard for adoption on calendar number 27. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Excuse me. Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 27 has been adopted. Borough, excuse me, Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 8, CD1 N160122CMR, in the matter of an application for the renewal of a previously approved authorization concerning Westervelt Estates for adoption on calendar number 28. Chairman Weisbrod.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa?
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor? Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Calendar number 28 has been adopted. The next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 21. Borough of Manhattan Calendar number 29, CD3, C160137ZMM. A public hearing in the matter of an application for an amendment of the zoning map concerning the East Houston Street rezoning.
The first speaker, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for
You're welcome.
wading your way through all of that.
You're welcome.
Rest for a moment. First speaker is Nick Hawkins. Welcome, Mr. Hawkins. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
Good.
Good morning, Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners. My name is Nick Hawkins. I'm a land use attorney at Greenberg-Trarick, and I'm here today with respect to the application for a C25 commercial overlay to a depth of 100 feet along 2.5 blocks on the south side of East Houston Street, between Norfolk Street and the center line between Clinton and Attorney Streets. The rezoning would allow approximately 7,240 square feet of ground floor commercial use instead of doctor's offices in a 13-story mixed-use building to be constructed at 255 East Houston. We believe there's a very strong land use rationale for the application. At 125 feet wide, East Houston is one of the widest, most heavily trafficked streets in lower Manhattan. Most of East Houston is already zoned for commercial use from Broadway all the way to Avenue A and Essex Street on both sides of the street, and on the north side of East Houston from Avenue A to Avenue B. There's also an existing C15 commercial overlay that runs up and down Clinton Street, and the proposed rezoning would fill in the gap in this absence of commercial zoning. The rezoning would also be consistent with existing land use patterns in the area. On the north side of the Houston Street where the commercial overlay is, there's a variety of local retail uses and services, dry cleaners, wine store, things like that. Within the rezoning area itself, there's 19 sites. 8 of those are already zoned to allow commercial use, and they have typical local retail and commercial uses. The C25 overlay would allow some additional uses, things like health clubs and bike shops, and if that doesn't work, funeral homes. In the remainder of the rezoning area, there are 4 existing non-conforming sites with retail and drinking establishments, and the rezoning would allow, would synchronize the existing land use patterns with the zoning. In addition, these non-conforming uses, as you know, non-conforming uses may not be structurally altered, and they lose their grandfathering if they're redeveloped. So that acts as a discouragement for these properties to be redeveloped and comply with the and pursue the R8A zoning. It acts on a drag of the provision of additional housing, including affordable housing. With the exception of doctor's offices, most community facility uses are of a contemplative nature that require quiet. Think of things like schools and universities and houses of worship. East Houston Street is not particularly quiet. It's not particularly conducive to those types of uses. Community facility uses are allowed in residential areas and are allowed on side streets because they are quiet, and there's a substantial portion of residential zoning in the area that can accommodate commercial uses. And finally, this stretch of East Houston Street, the south side, there's playground here, and doctor's offices, which is what would be there if the rezoning is not approved. That closes at night. It doesn't provide a very active streetscape. And by having some retail use or a restaurant-type use here, then you've got, instead of having 2 blocks that are fairly vacant at night, you have some activity.
Well timed, Mr. Hawkins. Questions for Mr. Hawkins? Ms. Levin.
Mr. Hawkins, I'd like to compliment you on a very succinct and
clear and strong argument in favor of the rezoning, but you're certainly aware of the positions that the community board and the Manhattan Borough president took.
Yes.
And to your main argument about the strong land use rationale for this rezoning, they cite the 2008 neighborhood rezoning, which intentionally left this stretch of frontage out of the commercial zoning. So the argument is that that was what was intended at the time. There was a land use rationale for keeping commercial uses out of these sites, and that nothing significant has changed in the area that justifies a new look at what was done in a more comprehensive way in 2008. So how would you respond to that?
I respond in a couple of manners. One is I'm not actually myself convinced that this particular stretch was intentionally left out of a commercial rezoning. The 2008 Lower East Side East Village rezoning covered 111 blocks, and the main thrust of that rezoning was to put in contextual height and setback and bulk controls in the area. There were some areas that were rezoned to allow commercial use, but that wasn't really the main point. We met at the request of the staff, or the encouragement of the staff, we met with the community board in 2011 to address this very point, and presented to them the idea that we would be seeking a rezoning in this area. They didn't raise the fact that they thought that community facilities were the most appropriate use here. What they told us at that time was that they wanted to ensure that any project that was constructed here would be built with inclusionary housing on site. And we've done that. We have a rental project, a contemplated rental project that will have maximum inclusionary housing on site.
Thank you.
Ms. Delausse.
My question was going to be along the same lines, and since you raised the meeting in 2011 where the issue of the commercial overlay, whether it was purposeful or not, and not being there, at that time, did you or your client disclose that the lease was going to be ending for the community facility use, that you were contemplating ending it earlier than originally
No, we didn't.
intended?
My client did not. That was a misstatement that was made at the community board by one of the community board members. My client did not end the lease. This building was occupied when my client bought the building in 2004. It was occupied by a daycare program and a Head Start program with a lease through ACS. ACS had a unilateral option to, on a year's notice, to terminate the lease. ACS, when they terminated the lease, and I think it was in 2010, actually, they did it. They told us they were doing it because they were consolidating their programs with the Escuela Hispanic program across Suffolk Street. In fact, my client, put $100,000 worth of renovations and repairs into the building when they purchased it, with the contemplation of keeping the daycare use there. That was a good lease. It was a reasonable return on the building. And he's tried for the last 5 years to find another conforming community facility use and hasn't had any luck doing that. They've gotten close with 2 schools, but nobody wants, except maybe the community board, a daycare center along East Houston Street.
Any other questions for Mr. Hawkins? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Erica Baptiste from the Manhattan Borough President's Office. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners. I'm Erica Baptiste, and I'm an urban planner with the Manhattan Borough President's Office, and I'm here to express our concerns with the proposed zoning map amendment to establish a C25 district within an existing R8A district on 2.5 blocks on the south side of East Houston Street between Norfolk and the central line between Clinton and Attorney Street. In 2008, demolition and construction work at 265 East Houston Street destabilized the building at 255 East Houston Street and resulted in a vacate order of the property that was used by Action for Progress Daycare Center for approximately 40 years. The applicant informed us that the daycare center moved to a small space on the north side of Suffolk, or just south of the site on Suffolk Street because it better suited their needs. The applicant argues that a community facility space is no longer a viable option on this block, but such use existed for decades, and even a neighboring building, which is nearly completed, which will have residential, will also have a community facility space on the ground floor, which was historically there, was a church. Since the daycare center vacated the premises, 255 East Houston Street has remained blighted, covered in graffiti and scaffolding, and there have been open violations from the Department of Buildings. Technically, commercial overlay is appropriate on a wide street, but we have to think of the neighborhood context, and these 2.5 blocks are a gateway to more residential neighborhood. Although there are more existing non-conforming commercial uses along East Houston Street, these blocks were specifically designated for contextual residential use under the 2008 East Village Lower East Side rezoning. The 2008 rezoning reinforced the use of the avenues for retail and residential by extending the C25 commercial overlay over just 4 blocks along 2nd Avenue and concentrating new residential development with an incentive for affordable housing on wider streets. Applying the proposed C25 commercial overlay to facilitate the construction of a 13-story mixed-income residential building will go against what the community vision for their neighborhood, what the community still supports, and what the city supported. With the recent loss of Rivington House, it is important to preserve as much designated community facility uses in the neighborhood, particularly when there is already a proliferation of commercial uses throughout the district. Therefore, the Manhattan Borough President recommends disapproval of this ULURP application.
Thank you, Ms. Baptiste. Questions? Ms. Efron.
Thank you. Is there any dispute of facts around the ACS cancellation of the lease? You said that the applicant represented that. Has your office checked with ACS to see if the facts are other?
Oh, sorry. We haven't checked with ACS about what happened with that applicant, but they are around the corner on Suffolk Street. It's a smaller, they're occupying a smaller space, but I don't know exactly what happened between the landlord and the ACS. Or, no, I mean, it was Action for Progress Daycare Center. I was there, but we didn't verify.
Is there any more information you can give us about the you mentioned that there was some question about the viability of the location because of a buildings department violation?
Well, the building, when the building next door, 265 East Houston Street, they were doing demolition and construction work, and it damaged 255 East Houston, and that's why there's a vacate order from DOB and why the daycare center had to leave. Now, there are still a number of different violations on the building, but maybe the applicant can also speak to. It looks like there may be a permit for a 10-story residential building there, so I'm not sure if even some of these are lifted, but when I checked on the DOB database, there are still outstanding violations on this site.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Baptiste? Yes, Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning. So it seems there seems to be some rationale for, commercial overlay on a very busy, wide street in Manhattan, but there's also the need to balance the concern of the loss of community facilities. And I wondered if you could sort of speak to sort of just the trends in the loss of community space in this area. You mentioned there was a loss of one particular facility in your comments, and how could you sort of speak to the bigger picture, what's happening with respect to community spaces? Are new spaces being built by HPD that could potentially,
Well, I'm not really an expert on all of the community facility spaces that have been lost. What's been one thing in my office and my division, we've been focusing on Rivington House and just other potential loss of community facilities throughout the borough. Maybe this is something that Gigi, the chair of CB3, can speak more to. But I would just say also, as far as the commercial overlay, it would seem like it would make sense to have more commercial space here, considering that there are a number of occupied commercial spaces along this stretch. However, there are also a number of vacancies throughout even where the commercial overlays exist now. So it doesn't really make, to our office, it doesn't really make sense to add more commercial when there's already when there are already existing vacancies throughout the district as well.
And do you know anything about the developer's efforts to market the space over the years that he mentioned they had some trouble filling it?
Yes, there are a number of articles I found online, and also I spoke with the applicant about their marketing efforts, and it seemed that deals did fall through. The applicant informed us that they were working on a lease with two groups. I think it was two organizations, or Blue Man Group and a school, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but they both are in other buildings in the area. So they're nearby, but they decided not to choose this space.
Thank you.
Ms. Baptiste, you heard Mr. Hawkins testify about, and there are, along the stretch, a number of existing non-conforming retail uses, and his statement that being non-conforming uses, any significant change or upgrading or expansion or whatever would be precluded absent a retail overlay. What do you make of that? I mean, wouldn't it be better to allow those uses to be upgraded rather than deteriorate over time?
I mean, I don't think Gail or anyone in our office would say we want them to deteriorate over time. So, I don't know, I think it's just a little difficult to really answer. I think that should probably be something that the community voices their opinion on a little bit more, considering that they were very vocal with the rezoning in 2008.
Any other questions to Ms. Baptiste? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker, speaking of the Community Board, is Gigi Lee, Chair of Community Board 3. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Weisbrod, and good morning, Commissioners. My name's Gigi Lee. I currently serve as Chair of Community Board 3, which 255 Houston Street is within. So I don't want to repeat any of the information that has been brought up. What I will say is that CB3 continues to lose valued community facilities. We've lost 3 senior homes in the past 4 years. And I know that in Councilmember Rosie Mendez's district, we've lost 2 daycare centers in the past 2 budget cycles because of space issues. So I wanted to address your question right away. Again, so for over 40 years, our understanding is that 255 East Houston Street has housed a very valuable community facility. It was a city-subsidized daycare center serving about 350 children. And during our extensive 2008 East Village rezoning process, it was specifically with this daycare center in mind that the community asked for any rezoning to allow for community facilities on the ground floor. And recognizing the importance of affordable childcare and similar options for community benefits, the community intended for 255 East Houston to remain a community facility. We know that the current rezoning applicant seeks to have a spot rezoning, but we think that this spot rezoning contradicts the recommendations of the community planning process from 2008. And so while CB3 already has a preponderance of residential areas with community overlays where the commercial space tends to eventually be used for nightlife or any other activities that have really been kind of eroding the quality of life of residents in the East Village area, that would be one of the concerns. And this rezoning would open up additional areas on Houston Street and narrow streets for such activity, which again are contrary to the needs of the board. So I'm here today to stress that CB3 does oppose this application, and I will answer any questions to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Questions? Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for coming and taking your time to testify. A question, you said in your testimony that this daycare center was the reason for the particular zoning framework that was selected along these blocks. So absent the daycare center, would this have been zoned commercial?
No, I think that, and I was, just to be clear, I was not on the board yet during the 2008 rezoning, but in the conversations around this application, maintaining every possible zoning for things to be a community facility were definitely a priority throughout that process, is my understanding. So I don't know, I can't speak to this particular location as to whether this would have turned commercial if it weren't for this facility, but I know that this particular facility, because of its longstanding history in the community, was one of the reasons for it, the strong support for community facility.
Okay, and the developer had mentioned some of the developer's representative had mentioned some struggles filling the space. Do you have any sort of insight into that? Because clearly we want uses in that space, and what is your take on that?
So I think what was represented before is my understanding that the applicant has tried to commit to a community facility in the space. I think that, the only thing I can speak to is that that's what the community board would like it to stay as. And there have been and continue to be organizations that approach the community board talking about the need for community space. So I guess I can't speak to the real estate market of that, but I know that there is a dire need of nonprofits to have additional space.
Thank you.
Mr. Reade.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, to the degree that organizations have approached the community board for space, have you directed them to this location since?
Yeah, so every application that comes before the community board where there is a possibility for community space, we have been strong advocates to connect possibilities with organizations, even with Essex Crossing, a huge support for community space in which we made that a priority of our plan. Really, every single possible, even as of right application or rezoning application that comes before us, we push community space very, very hard because there's just such a dire need for it.
But what I was going to ask is, to the degree that organizations have come to you looking for space and you've directed them to, let's say, this location.
To this particular applicant?
None of them have been able to reach an agreement?
To the best of my knowledge, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I have two questions, Ms. Lee. One, I know you weren't on the community board and were involved in 2008. Were you on the community board in 2011 when the daycare center vacated the space?
Yes.
And just to clear up, the information that we had from Mr. Hawkins was that it was the daycare center that vacated as opposed to the owner terminating the lease.
I have no additional details. There's two very conflicting stories, and I have not, I don't know.
And let me ask you the question that I asked Ms. Baptiste, and she deferred to you on.
Yes.
Right now, along the stretch, there are a number of non-conforming retail uses. And by not permitting this overlay, those non-conforming uses will, over time, continue to deteriorate, will not be able to make significant investments or expand. Is that really a desirable outcome here?
So at the discussion at the land use meeting, there was that line of discussion. Our land use committee is aware that there is a strong argument for the other side. The way I would answer that question is that as the board, that what we are very concerned about is sort of the overall planning of this neighborhood and this community. And we have just seen so much pressure and development that what the community and the board is really responding to is really feeling like we are on the defensive and trying to save each and every spot that we can. And so, of course, we do not want any continued deterioration of any space, but we also feel like the community has just been really moving in a direction that is not what we'd like to see.
Any other questions for Ms. Lee? Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Thank you.
The next speaker, turning back to people in support, is Sami Mafar. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Weiss, Board and Commissioners. My name is Sami Mafar. I am part of the ownership and the development team at 255 East Houston, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi. One question, could you speak to your understanding of the termination of the lease versus, why did the daycare vacate the space?
So it was communicated to us that after the building was destabilized, they got a vacate order, and subsequently the space had actually become too large for them. And they sent us a letter stating so. And they had a partnership with the school that was existing on Suffolk Street to the east of this property, and they decided to consolidate into that space.
So they exercise their right
They exercise, as per the lease, the right to terminate the lease.
because of issues with the building?
I believe it was a combination of issues with the building, and the space had become too large for them.
Were you in a position at that time to help them remedy some of those violations?
The violations were caused by the work next door. So they had to stabilize that, to brace their building before we could do any work to keep the tenant. Obviously, it was to our interest to keep the tenant. It was a great tenant. Unfortunately, the adjacent ownership delayed in bracing our building, and therefore delayed my ability to remedy the violations.
Okay, and one last question, could you speak to your efforts to market the space and identify additional community uses?
Sure. So we engaged 3 different brokers, Sinvin, to try to find us a community facility. We engaged a Wexler medical group to find us a medical group if possible. And then we did another broker as well, I don't remember the name. We marketed for almost 4 years. We negotiated one lease thoroughly with a group called the Blue Man Group, and spent thousands of dollars in attorney's fees and architectural fees, try to retrofit the space for them. Subsequently, they decided they didn't want to be there, and they bought a building at a different location. We then started to negotiate with a school called the Cook Center, and the space was too big for them, and they decided to go somewhere else.
Did you receive referrals from the community board during that period?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Ms. Delausse, and then Ms. Efron.
Most of the questions Commissioner Ortiz asked, I'm just just to follow up on the situation with the adjacent construction that destabilized your property and the delay by those owners to respond. Having lived through something like this through an organization that I run, I'm familiar with how challenging that can be. I'm just wondering, so your insurance didn't step in to stabilize your building while they worked out the details with the adjacent owners, so you wouldn't risk losing your tenant?
Well, they had to do bracing on their property to hold my building
On their
up.
property?
On their property.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Efron.
Hi. Your land use lawyer mentioned that you had a reasonable return on your investment from the ACS daycare lease that was in place there. Were the leases that you were negotiating or the leases that were being sought by the brokers you engaged for a similar rate and size?
Yes, more or less.
Thank you. And I just have one other question. The Borough President's Office mentioned there were additional violations still open on the building. Are you aware of any violations on the building, and can you share what sort they are with us?
So all the violations that were existing on the building were caused because of the destabilization of the building, because of the construction next door. We have now remedied all violations, and we have a permit for a new building, and you can't do that unless you have remedied all violations. So all violations have been remedied.
Thanks.
Ms. Levin?
So the Blue Man Group and the Cook Center and the other efforts that you described to find a community facility user, was that for the existing building?
Yes,
Okay, and then you when that failed, you switched to the current plan of redeveloping the site with a new building?
that's correct.
Okay. So could you tell what kind of, if you do have the opportunity to add a commercial tenant in the ground floor space, what kind of commercial use do you imagine including?
We don't have any more right now, but we just due to the building, we need to be able to have a wider spectrum of tenants that we can put in there. You may have commercial zoning, and at the end, if there's a school, you may get a school.
Mhm.
If you have commercial zoning, you can put community facility, you can put a school.
Right.
But if you have community facility, it may sit vacant for God knows how long. So we don't have someone right now, no.
But the space has been roughly designed in order to get the permits from the Department of Buildings, right? I mean, you mentioned that you have permits for a new building.
Yes.
So how is the ground floor space, for what kind of use is the ground floor space configured in those plans?
Our plans is for existing, is for the existing allowable space.
But what kind of use? For example, do you have ventilation in it for a restaurant?
I am not sure.
The community board has expressed a strong desire not to see additional nightlife uses there. Is that a limitation you'd be amenable to?
It's very reasonable, and I think our interests are aligned in that statement.
Thank you.
You know this market, Mr. Mafar, is the market in terms of leasing, basically. I appreciate your interest in being able to seek a wider set of uses, but in terms of a market rent, in this area, would a not-for-profit or a for-profit provide essentially the same ground floor rent, as far as you know?
As far as I know, as the market sits today, it would be pretty much equivalent, as far as I know.
So, and again, furtherance of the question that Ms. Levin asked, as far as you know, the space would be able to accommodate either certain kinds of for-profit retail uses as well as a range of community facility uses, as far as you know, as you're configuring the new space.
I believe so.
And just again to underscore your view in response to Ms. Levin's question, that the interest in limiting or precluding nightlife as the community is concerned about it is reasonable in your view.
It is reasonable in my view.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Mufar? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this particular matter? If not, the hearing is closed, and we will do our own independent investigation with ACS and get back to all the commissioners with the history of this site according to ACS. So,
Okay. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 30, CD1, C160145, ZSM. A public hearing in the matter of an application for the grant of a special permit concerning 70 Vestry Street parking facility.
first speaker is Jerry Johnson. Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. My name is Jerry Johnson with the firm of Fox Rothschild. We represent Bridgeland Vestry LLC, the applicant for this action. It seeks a special permit pursuant to sections 13451 of the resolution to increase the number of accessory parking spaces from 9 to 42 for this in an automated parking facility. The development site occupies the block front on West Street between Vestry and Desbrosses in the Tribeca mixed-use district. The development itself consists of a 12-story and penthouse mixed-use building with 47 dwelling units and some commercial space on the ground floor, and is as of right except for this action. The building is designed as a U-shaped structure with the main entrance of the building off a central courtyard. The automated parking facility is accessed through a curb cut on Desbrosses, where vehicles will enter and proceed to pass the main entrance, circle around the courtyard, and enter the entry bay to the parking facility. Vehicles will exit the facility from the same entry bay, circle through the courtyard, and proceed to exit on Vestry Street. The main entrance has been designed with a layover lane, so vehicles loading and unloading may be bypassed, avoiding queuing for other vehicles entering and exiting the site. The special permit requires a number of findings to be made, and the application materials provided have to provide detailed discussion of how we meet those findings. I'd like to point out that we have had positive recommendations from both the Community Board and the Borough President's Office. I'm here to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Johnson? Ms. Delauze.
Hi, Mr. Johnson, I have two questions. One is actually Commissioner Levin's question that she's been asking, which is, could you just walk us through the rationale for why the entrance is on Vestry and the exit is on the northernmost street? I'm sorry, yeah, I'm trying to look at the arrow, sorry. But if you could explain why that was chosen. And then I just want to follow up on the request from the Community Board in Manhattan about the square footage trying to provide for local amenities and any, the commercial square footage, or community facility square footage to try to address any local needs.
Okay. So there are a number of factors when trying to design how a garage works and how the entrance works. And it's both the street grid surrounding the property as well as the internal circulation of the building and how the building gets designed. And when they were designing how the parking garage would work with the subgrade space, because all of the parking is below on the cellar and subcellar levels, accessed by an elevator. They thought that the best location for that on the site, due to site dimensions and the site being wider than this site, was right here for the elevator. So it's up against, and then the parking is most efficient along the edge here. So having that location for the elevator and wanting it access off the courtyard, the circulation works better coming in. People can pull in, drop off here, then circle around. This is a reservoir space required, or the entry bay and go in. Most importantly, if they're exiting here, they exit the same way. So to do this maneuver was more complicated internally than to do this. So those
That's
were
the
the
rationale.
factors that went into the decision. And understanding, yes, we're next to the West Side Highway, and a lot of vehicles will probably be coming and going from the West Side Highway. There will still be a number of vehicles entering and exiting from the city itself, primarily cabs or others bringing people to the site.
So it's really about the internal configuration of the elevator that really determined things.
It was a factor of everything, but yes.
And how about the second question that the community board had? Any plans?
So the community, the discussion was, my recollection of the meeting was, it was about community benefits and giving back to the neighborhood because we were seeking a special permit. And while the site itself is fully developed in that, the developer is an affiliate of the related companies. They are good neighbors to wherever they go. And they work to be good neighbors. They work with community groups in the area to be good neighbors. Their location, their surroundings, they work with everybody. So they will be working with the community. In terms of the space that's in the site, I'm not sure what the small amount of commercial space that's going to be over here is going to be occupied by. But I don't think it's destined to be community facility space, but they will work with the community on any request. Beautification, they're going to be opposite Hudson River Park. I'm sure there's going to be.
Thank you.
Mr. Cantor, and then Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you. Is there any opportunity for a left turn into the parcel crossing traffic, or a right turn crossing traffic? Either of these are either of these two-way streets?
No, they're both single.
one-way. Okay.
Just Vestry is eastbound, Desbrosses is westbound.
Okay.
One way.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning. So under, as of right, you would be allowed to incorporate 9 residential accessory parking spaces for 47 units. You're now looking to, you're requesting 42 spaces. So you're going from, a ratio of 19% to 89%. 20% is the target rate. And so my question for you is why do you need these spaces? What's the market rationale? Why are they required for this building?
So I'll answer the percentages first. While the target rate is 20% and you're permitted 20% on a site, pursuant to the methodologies of the special permit, the area that we have to study, the target rate is 20%. Right now, it's at negative 21 based on the look-back period and the amount of spaces that have been lost. So we're way below the target rate of residential accessory parking spaces for buildings within the area. The spaces themselves, while there are 42, whether they'll be used by people in the building, which we believe most of them will. They're larger units. They're looking for families. We believe the families will have vehicles, and so they will need a place to locate those vehicles. If they're not located here, they have to find a space in another garage, or they'll be on the street. So here, it's keeping it internal to the site. The spaces that don't get used because of the type of garage it is, they don't become while they could be utilized by anybody based on the new regulations, they are residential parking space, and as an automated facility, you have to know how it works. You have to have a key to get into it. You have to have your punch code to access the facility. So they will be based on people that are in the neighborhood, and we believe that there will be a demand there for it.
One of the things that you mentioned is that, you're going to have families here. These are, apartments are fairly expensive apartments. These people will likely have cars. If they're not parked here, they might be parked elsewhere. But, I continue to wonder if we're backing ourselves into a corner a little bit, because we're making a rationale that the only way you can really build here and meet the needs of this particular segment is to ensure that every single one of them has the opportunity to park their vehicle. We're still in Manhattan. We're still close to transit. So you know, it's a little bit of a, I understand this is not your concern, but it's a little bit of a death by a thousand cuts. You know, if we use the rationale that the market requires this, you know, we're gonna need to say that for every single building that comes our way, and then at what point, when we hit that 20% threshold for the community, where do we stand? We no longer can approve these? You understand sort of the bigger issue?
I do, but I also think that the special permit is a response to a change in patterns of vehicle ownership and what's been going on in the city for the last 40 years. I mean, if you read the report from the commission when they redid the Manhattan parking core text and how vehicles are coming back in, you know, it's an interesting study in how the policies previously have created a situation where people started to use mass transit more to do the commuting into the city, and that there are less people driving into the city on a commutation basis. But because of the people moving back into the city, yes, some of them are more affluent, but also people that they have kids and they have families and they have cars that make it easier for them to get around the city, and car ownership has changed because people have become, so residential ownership has become bigger. So those spaces that were previously used for commutation are now used to just park residential cars. And so this is a way to try to accommodate and create a situation where there's still parking available for people that live here because car ownership has gone way up, as opposed to still providing an incentive for people to commute via mass transit and other forms.
I mean, what's your sense of the utilization of, you know, these automobiles by the average resident? I understand this has not been built, but, you know, if you're familiar with this product type, you know, are these people who are...
I can only speak for myself and what I see in the building that I live in that also has a garage, and our garage is much larger. The garage is primarily used by people coming and going commuters. The people that live in the building and that park there are actually only taking their cars out usually on the weekends, or maybe a one-off during the week if they need it for some reason. They usually don't use their vehicles on a daily basis in and out. That's been my experience, what I've noticed in my building in this room.
And where's your building?
It's in the West Village.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Efron.
I think one aspect of my previous concern about the one-to-one parking ratio was emissions. And with the increasing and incredibly quick desire and calling for electric cars, I just wonder how many electric car chargers related we'll be putting into the garage.
I believe it's about 20% of the spaces, but all of the trays can be adaptable to electric cars.
Thank you.
And again, the way it works is if they don't have a spot for it, once a car is charged, it gets moved, and another car that has the plug into the tray can get put in there and charge while the other one is.
Does that mean it's attended, or is that automated?
It's automated.
The charging is automated?
It's all part of a computer system.
Thank you.
That's actually very scary. Are you saying that somehow the computer system is aware when a car needs charging?
Yes.
Or
No. If a car has one of the plugs in it, it'll go into a spot that has the capability to charge that vehicle. It's my understanding that when that vehicle is fully charged, it will know that it's fully charged.
and then it gets shunted off
And
to
then it
a
can be put into another spot.
non-charger
And if
space?
somebody needs a space, then that car can go.
Yeah, but someone, sorry.
Well, Ms. Levin and then Mr. Cantor, back to you.
Well, at the risk of derailing a conversation, which I know, but about the operational aspects of this, but I know Commissioner Cantor is going to get back to it. I just wanted to thank you for your explanation about the direction of the in and out here, which I suppose does make some sense, although I noticed that the renderings of the building on the building's website show the cars going in the other way. So it was obviously rethought at some point. But is the only, is there just one where's the entrance to the building? Is it off the courtyard?
Yeah, the main entrance is right here off the courtyard. So there's walkways on both sides for pedestrians to walk in and to be in a protected lane going to the entrance. That was partly due to flood control reasons and then the fact that limiting openings and access to the site.
Okay, so the drive-through is not just for access to the parking garage, but it serves as the main entrance to the building as well?
Correct, so so the driveway has its own entrance, and then it's separate from another walkway entrance that will provide pedestrian access into the site. That's correct, on both sides.
Okay. So that does make some sense. It's not just for cars coming in and out off the West Side Highway,
Correct.
but for people doing their business in
Correct.
further inland and coming home or whatnot. So, okay. So that gets me over my concern about the directionality, I think. How are these spaces going to be made available to building residents? Are they on a monthly basis? Are they being sold? There's an article in the New Deal yesterday describing the fabulous features of this building and indicates they'll be sold. Is that been decided yet?
If somebody owns a unit, they have the ability to either own or I think they may be leased as part of the unit. And then they can either travel with the unit if it's sold in the future, or the ones that aren't sold will be maintained by the management company, and so that they can be leased out to other people in the area as a residential parking, because it's, again, it's an automated facility. You need the key card, you need to know how the pad works, you need to know, so it's not something that you just pass off to somebody else and say, this is how you do it, like, you need to know. So it's, and then I guess those leases would be on a monthly basis or,
Okay.
but I can,
Well, the information, the real deal says, is that the 9 accessory spaces are going to be, are going to cost $500,000 apiece. Is that what the market for
I wouldn't
committed
know.
parking spaces is in the neighborhood?
I wouldn't know what the market is, but, the real deal might be closer
300
to
square
that.
feet.
Thank you.
300 square feet? No.
Mr. Cantor,
Sir,
Ms. Levin's going to go into the parking.
Yeah, we're all in the wrong business here.
You have to build the building too.
if I'm an owner of the apartment, and I want a space, do I get an assigned space?
No, you get access to the garage. The garage, because it's fully automated, gives you the key that allows your car to go in, so the 42 spaces are the 42 spaces.
Okay.
So what happens is, your car, when you drive into the entry bay, you go on there's a tray, you step out, this all locks up, the car drops, and then the robots inside take the car and put it in whatever empty space is available.
Okay, now I've got myself a Tesla.
You got yourself a what?
A Tesla, an electric car.
Hmm?
I'm up to here in hot, that's beside me.
It's a software work.
So now I want to park in one of the spaces that is specific to charging.
Yeah, so when you,
Now, am I to understand from what you had said earlier, that the act of opening up the electric door, if you will, in the car, the act of coming out with the pipe, with the outlet, with the receptacle, is automated?
no, what is, when you pull in and you park on the tray, and you get out of your car, you will then take the plug in the car and you plug it into the tray.
So it's a manual effort to load the car for charging.
Right, but if you have the it'll know that you need the electric tray, so
That
the
makes
electric
more
tray will be available for you. You plug it in, and then it takes it down and it puts it into one of the charging stations in the
Now I've
garage.
taken out the one space or two spaces that are allocated for charging. The car gets charged. How do you get it out of there and relocate it?
So the cars are on trays that are managed by robots that are all run by this computer system.
Right?
Right, so that computer system takes the place of the 5 garage attendants that move vehicles around
Who
normally.
pulls the plug from the car and closes up the car?
The car stays on the tray with the plug in. The tray will move within the garage so another car can go in. And when you get your car delivered, you will unplug, when you pick up the car and get in it, you unplug it and you drive out of the garage.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson? This is like the ninth tutorial we've had on automated parking, and each time it gets increasingly more complex. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Interesting.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Ahmed Tagani from the Manhattan Borough President's Office.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners. My name is Ahmed Tagani, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the Manhattan Borough President regarding her recommendation of approval for the application by Bridgeland Vestry LLC to seek a special permit pursuant to sections 1345 and 13451 of the zoning resolution to allow for an accessory off-street parking facility on site with 42 accessory off-street parking spaces in the cellar and sub-cellar level of a new as-of-right residential building currently under construction at 70 Vestry Street. Despite the reduction in parking, partly due to the special permit crafted as part of the broader Manhattan Core parking tax, it is clear to our office that this requirement has not eliminated the desire for additional parking spaces as more luxury residential units are constructed as of right in Community Board 1 and marketed to residents with expectations that parking will be provided on site. While there is a required residential growth parking study to allow for new parking spaces, our review of previous parking special permits has repeatedly proven to us that a broader analysis is needed to gauge the justification for additional spaces that would be allowed as of right. Just to say that, this is something that was mentioned at the review session that I recognize. We do want to point out that we are grateful to DCP and CPC for heeding these concerns and reflecting them in application guideline changes and the posting of the DCA license data online so that community and other members can make their own analysis as they review these applications. And I lost my thought, which is great. In this application, we continue to call on DCP and CPC to consider more additional set of factors aside from the parking methodology, including the absolute availability of parking, the supply of parking prior to the 10-year look back, and the current capacity and utilization rates of parking facilities in the neighborhood, access to mass transit, distance from arterial roadways, and finally to evaluate the garage design and its interface with the pedestrian realm. That said, for 70 Vestry Street, they have met all the relevant findings pursuant to Section 1345 and 13451 of the zoning resolution by completing the methodology framework, and according to those findings, is appropriate for this particular project. Even when applying the more robust criteria this office has employed over the last 2 years, this application is appropriate because of proximity to the West Side Highway, a major north-south roadway, and because this area did not have an oversupply of parking to start, and has experienced a true loss in spaces. As mentioned in our recommendation and in the residential parking study, there is a loss of parking capacity in the neighborhood, and measures have been proposed to enhance the pedestrian realm on this project. Additionally, the applicant has worked with their transportation engineers at Philip Habib and Associates to plan out a thoughtful vehicle and pedestrian circulation paths with signage throughout the development site. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. There are other things, but we have a really well laid out recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Tagani. Questions for Mr. Tagani? Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning. In the comments that were shared with us, you mentioned the desire to consider a more robust set of factors aside from the parking methodology analysis. Could you speak to those factors?
So from our application on 520 West 28th Street, one of the things that we thought would be appropriate would be something beyond a 10-year look back, additional consideration of some of the mass transit and human-powered options. One of the things that we cite is that there are 3 city bike locations to this site. We hope, and we, especially since there are 2 established bike lanes in the area and the 24 spaces in the garage, that will urge more people to use that human-powered association. In addition to that, there has been some movement to think about overlapping study areas and trying to make sure that a true counting of all the parking spaces available, both private and otherwise, in the area is considered part of the application. In terms of, one thing I can do is I know that we've written extensively about this in 2 or 3 other prior applications. I could pull together those facts and have them directed to you.
I found it interesting you mentioned, the opportunity to reclaim public space. Automobiles need streets, and more automobiles need higher capacity streets. And so it seems your argument is also that by reducing, the automobile usage, we can reclaim some of these spaces. Is that part of some of the rationale for reducing the sort of 1-to-1 ratio?
To a certain degree, well, hopefully I'm getting to the answer for your question, but one thing that we did see is that in terms of a building that may typically have high car ownership, pulling vehicles off street to deal with maybe low parking options on street, and keeping them in an automated system that was efficient and not contributing to emissions, just looking for parking outside, would be one way to reduce that stress on street parking. That may not be getting to your question, but.
Yeah, I think that's fine. One question I have for you is that, you also mentioned, we're increasingly in a situation where folks who, families and individuals who are looking to purchase in buildings like this have an expectation
Yes.
that they're going to have parking. So, as we look forward and think through, our ability to meet that expectation on a consistent basis, that's not the purpose of the zoning resolution or our goal, I would imagine. And so as you think ahead to, or it's not really a question, it's more sort of thinking out loud as we look at the methodology, how do we resolve that issue?
I think that's an excellent question. Currently, we looked at the rules and the parameters as they exist, and that's what we compared the project to. But I think what you're asking is something that we've thought about, and we've had success working with the CPC and DCP to start moving the ball forward on what the guidelines and the principles are toward a broader and robust analysis. We'd love to continue working on that. That's not something that we've stopped working on, and hopefully we can come back with even more recommendations the next time. But that's a good charge for our office, and we'll be happy to take up that charge.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other speakers on this item? There being none, the hearing is closed. The chair wants to make some remarks about 227th Street rezoning, which is the next matter before us. So we'll just pause for a few moments.
Should I read it first? Okay. Borough of Queens, calendar number 31, CD 13, C160070, ZMQ, a public hearing in the matter of an application for an amendment of the zoning map concerning the 227th Street rezoning. Please note that the proposed zoning district being established is C2 M1-2, not M1-1, as noted in the calendar.
The first speaker in this item is Lisa Orantia, is that correct? Orantia.
Good morning, Chairman Weisbrod and Commissioners. My name is Lisa Orantia, and I work at Ackerman LLP, the land use attorney for the applicant Idle Lots LLC. This is an application for a zoning map amendment to create a C22 overlay in an underlying R31 zoning district, and that will allow for the development of a public parking lot. In the area on the same block as the proposed development is the former site of a water supply tank, and there are two-family dwellings along 145th Road adjacent to the development site. The project area are adjoining lots. One is 10,000 square feet and the other is 2,000 square feet. It will be a corner lot with 100 feet of frontage on 227th Street and 120 feet of frontage along 145th Road. There is a 27-foot wide curb cut on 145th Road. Affiliates of the applicant own logistics facilities in the manufacturing area just south of the site. These facilities, one facility on lot 16 employs approximately 138 employees, and the other facility on lot 4 and 12 employ approximately 93 employees, and these facilities satisfy all the requirements for accessory parking. The proposed development will make productive use of a site that's been vacant and neglected for many years. It will be a public parking lot for 25 spaces. It's compatible with the existing commercial and manufacturing uses within a larger residential area. It'll serve nearby retail stores in the commercial overlay to the east. It will serve users of the storage and office buildings in the manufacturing district, and it will relieve parking demand in the surrounding residential streets in an area with limited mass transportation. The community has expressed support for this application. Councilmember Richards wrote a letter asking for favorable consideration, finding that the vacant parcel will be revitalized and the proposed lot will ensure sufficient on-street parking will be available to residents. The community board voted unanimously in favor of the rezoning, noting the upgrades made to the vacant lot shown in before and after pictures and appreciating the security measures in the applicant's nearby storage and office buildings and the design that keeps truck traffic off residential streets. And finally, the community board recommended approval of the application, noting that applicant has improved both the site and the surrounding area.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rentia. I don't know where to start with this. This has been a very disturbing application to us. First of all, the material that was submitted was misleading, to say the least, in the sense that it showed a vacant lot, which in fact was not a vacant lot. Can you explain exactly what happened here?
Sure. I'd like to go over the timeline of the application, if I may, and also the managing partner of the applicant company, Idle Lots. Jim Ross is here to provide additional details. So in June of 2015, the applicant's cartographer took pictures of the lot, and they accurately showed a vacant, unimproved site. In July 2015, we prepared and submitted this rezoning application, and at that time, there were no improvements to the site. In October of 2015, we officially filed, and we were not aware of any improvements of the site at that time.
Don't you have communication with your client?
We do.
Who's responsible for putting the application together, you or your client?
We work together to put it together.
So between the time that you prepared the application and the time that this was certified here, you were not in communication with your client about what your client was doing?
We were in communication with the client, and at the time of certification, which was in March, we had revised the application. At that time, it did include pictures of the improved lot, so the certified application accurately showed the improvements to the lot at that time. If I could just continue with the timeline, we were advised in February by the Department of City Planning that cars were parked in the lot, and permits had been issued in September of 2015.
So between the time that you initially filed your application in 2015 and February of this year, until you were actually advised by this department that there were actually cars in this lot and the lot had been improved and your application bore no resemblance whatsoever to what was actually happening there, you had no communication with your client about what was happening there?
We had communication with our client, but we had not been advised of the improvements that were made.
Well, I mean, what kind of communication could that be since the application itself, or what was actually happening on the ground, was so vastly different from what you had submitted? I mean, I don't,
Well,
could you explain that?
we collect information from the client. We rely on the information the client gives to us, and we represent that to the city. The way we put together our applications is we use the photographs that the cartographer puts together. We assemble the application and we submit that information. We continue to rely on it unless we learn of an update, which we had in February, and we acted to correct and update the information and provide it to the city. The applicant also wrote a letter to the commission explaining what they had done, the reasons for it. They did receive violations. They received 3 ECB violations. We attended those scheduled hearings. We received a determination yesterday on 3 of them, sustaining all 3 violations. There was work without a permit, unlawful use in a residential district, and use without a C of O. And the Department of Buildings continues to visit the site. They got the 4th violation for unlawful use, which is returnable
So
in July.
during this time, since violations were issued on this site, to this site for all the matters that you mentioned, and all of those violations, I understand you correctly, have been sustained by the ECB. That is, they have found that those violations were justified. During that time, and now you say there's a 4th violation, which I assume means that the lot continues to be used illegally. Can you explain why, despite all these violations over the last several months, despite the notice, despite the misleading application in the first place, the site continues to be used in contravention of zoning?
Well, the applicant started the parking use for the convenience of the tenants of the nearby facilities and for the convenience of the surrounding neighborhood. The community has supported the use so far. They're aware of the parking use, and they still recommend the application. Our client has started the process of finding lawful locations for the people who are using the lots. They are aware that the use was not lawful.
But continue to just do it in contra, I mean, I don't understand an awareness of using it in violation of the law and then continuing to operate in violation of the law. It's really hard to understand.
They understand.
Didn't you advise them as counsel that they couldn't use it in violation of the law?
We certainly advised them that the use was not lawful, and they understood that the use was not lawful, and that's why this application was filed. They were overeager in starting this use. They should have waited for the process to be completed, but they moved too quickly.
But once having moved too quickly, they just decided, despite your legal advice to them, that they should just continue to ignore the
Well, I
requirements
understand
of the law?
from Mr. Ross, who's here to speak, that it is a process of shifting these users to other lawful spaces, and that process has begun, but he can give you a little more information on that.
But it's now May, or June, actually. It's been 4 months since the initial violations. The process has now begun 4 months later?
I'll defer to Mr. Ross on that.
Questions? Start with Ms. Levin and then Ms. Efron.
Ms. Ferrante, just to be clear, what's your role with Ackerman? Are you a lawyer or a?
I'm an of counsel.
Of counsel?
At Ackerman,
Okay.
yes.
You, I gather, your office began working on this file in June with the photos in July, but it wasn't until October that the application was actually filed with the Department of City Planning. What steps did you take with your client to ensure that the information in the application was correct? Did your client review the application immediately before it was filed?
Yes, yes. The client signs the application, reviews it, and submitted with the applicant's review.
Okay. And of course, the crux issue here is that application stated that this site was vacant.
Yes.
Which, as it turns out, was not true at the time. Do you specifically ask your clients to assure you that all of the information in the applications are correct?
We rely on the information the applicant gives us. We rely on the photographs that the cartographer provides, and unless we're given updated information, we don't send anyone back out to the site. We don't ask for updated photographs. We let the process continue unless we become aware that conditions have changed.
Okay, but you didn't seek specific assurance from the client that as of, beginning of October, everything is still as you understood it to be in June?
I'm one of the attorneys who works on this project. I wasn't the only one in communication with the client as to the kinds of questions that were put to the client. I'm not directly aware of those.
No.
We assumed that there was no change in the condition of the site.
Well, that turned out not to be a very good assumption. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Ms. Efron.
Hi, the application says that there are at least 2 tenants. I don't know if there are more than 2 leases, but there are tenants occupying the spaces that you've marked. Did your firm prepare the leases for those?
No, we did not.
But do you have information about the leases? Because I think it would be interesting to know if the leases have an obligation for the landlord to provide parking, and when in fact those leases were entered into.
We can ask the client to provide us with that information.
Thank you.
Mr. Dweck, and then Ms. Deluz.
You mentioned that the 3 ECB violations were sustained. Do you know the fine amounts on the violation?
The total fine amounts are $2,000. The penalty for work without a permit is more substantial. There's a civil penalty that the Department of Buildings imposes when permits are obtained, and that is that 14 times the filing fee is charged and not less than $5,000.
So in the aggregate, the total amount of penalties paid would be, or you?
Approximately $7,000, and we have the one pending ECB violation that's returnable in July.
Thank you.
Ms. Deluz.
I just wanted to follow up specific to the application. So for the new application is for 25 spaces. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the current unlawful use is accommodating over 30 spaces?
That's correct.
So I guess part of the question, whether you or your client could answer, you know, how will that decrease in capacity be accommodated? And considering that the future use can't be exclusive just to the logistics company employees that are, I assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, are currently using the parking, you know, how will the parking be attended, and how will it accommodate uses other than the existing manufacturing uses across the street?
So the plan is that the lot will be open to the public. It'll be a first-come, first-served basis. There will be an attendant on site, and to the extent that the illustrative plan needs to be changed to show the attendance booth, we'll modify that plan and submit it to you. As to the users, I believe Mr. Ross can give you more information on that, what the alternative locations will be.
Thank you.
Mr. Cantor.
Is the lot being used today?
I'll let Mr. Ross answer.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is James Ross.
I'd like to play some photographs for people to look at. First, I would like to address the commission. First, I'm very sorry, it was not our intent to make any misrepresentations to the commission. We were very eager to start the parking use for the convenience of our workers who are our tenants and the community, and we acted too quickly. As my partner, Mr. John Fufus, stated in February, we did not advise council that we started using the site for parking. We have commenced the procedure of notifying the tenants and figuring out a plan for them to, for us to relocate their vehicles. I'd first like to show you, these are the conditions in 2011, 2010, when we started our acquisition program in the 6-acre M1 zone. This was one of the...
Mr. Ross, use the microphone, please.
I'm sorry. This was the existing building, one of the existing buildings, which we subsequently redeveloped into a 135,000 square foot modern logistics building. There was actually a vacate notice on that building which precluded firemen from going in there in the case of a fire, since the building had been stripped and there was no electric. We acquired this building via foreclosure. We purchased the note and mortgage from a prominent New York commercial bank, completed the foreclosure, and subsequently constructed a building on the site. This is the entranceway to the building. This is on-site parking for that building over there. This is on-site parking for buildings that we acquired in 2012 that were run down and across the street from the property. This is a renovated portion of the existing building that we bought. Actually, the tenant in question, Markin, who is an international biologics logistics company. This is what the building looked like when we first came out there. This is what the building's the building looks like when we first came out here. This is what the buildings look like now. I have a few other pictures I'd like to show you. We've probably invested $45 million between the development of the new building and the acquisition and the upgrading of the existing building. In addition, we constructed, we believe, the first solar energy facility in southeast Queens, or even perhaps Manhattan, and all of the city, which had a reverse net metering situation where all of these solar energy is sold to Blumberg LLP for use at their headquarters on Lexington Avenue in Manhattan. They have one of the largest green power initiatives of any company in the city.
Is it the same site?
Excuse me?
Is that the same site we're discussing?
Well, no, it's across, the lot in question is across the street to service, I have some pictures of the lot, I'm just trying to get its location.
I think
It's
the
actually
question,
over here.
the question, Mr. Ross, is whether that facility is across the street from the parking lot.
Yes, it is, directly across the street. Directly, let me just. Okay, this is the. Excuse me, we have quite a few pictures of our property. As you see, we've made a number of presentations. This was the parking lot as we found it when we purchased it in 2014. And this is the parking lot which we mistakenly and eagerly constructed, which, as one of the members of the council indicated, has to be modified, which is from its current 35 spaces to 24. That's easily accomplished by constructing curbing with landscaping to create the legal barriers or berms or planted areas in the parking lot which will reduce the number of spaces. Again, that's not a particularly difficult task to do. It requires curbing and landscaping, and of course, the addition of a booth for the public parking. Let me just show you for a minute the location maps.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. That's it.
You give me an extra few seconds because I had so many.
No, you can answer questions.
Okay.
Questions for Mr. Ross? Start with Ms. Delos.
Mr. Ross, I appreciate that you and your partners have undertaken an important redevelopment project across the street. I don't think anyone has any beef whatsoever about that. I think it really just, obviously, if you have the level of sophistication to pull off a $45 million project with a really significant solar array, you have the wherewithal to know that you shouldn't build a parking lot before you have permission to do so. I think that's really the issue here. And the other piece of this, honestly, is that, I can entirely appreciate and understand that the surrounding community supports it because they prefer the employees not taking the on-street parking that they so desire. But you're also, the change in zoning that you're seeking would allow not just for a parking lot in the future, but for any, complying commercial use. So can you please speak to the intention of you and your partners to absolutely use it as outlined, considering that the zoning would allow for differing uses? And can you also, I appreciate the apology. I think, I would certainly advise you to keep your counsel in the loop as to what is going on with pieces of property that are going through public review in any future action.
We have no intention, and I believe it's been stated in the resolution, that this property will always remain as a public parking lot.
Okay.
Mr. Cantor.
Is the, excuse me, is the lot being used today?
Yes,
Why?
because we're in the process of emptying it out now.
How long have you known about the violations?
Several months.
How long does it take to notify a tenant that you can't use the lot effectively at the beginning of next week?
It can be done expeditiously, but we have to work out the issues of where we're going to relocate them to.
As my colleague noted, you're not an unsophisticated developer. You built well in this area. I know that the comments regarding your work are good as far as the work itself goes. I find it very difficult to understand how you or your staff were totally unaware of the timeline, okay? You built this facility, in my judgment. When I say you, I don't know if it's you or your people, okay? The facility was built knowing full well, in my judgment, that it was in violation. The facility finally was shown to be in violation. You have gotten approximately $7,000 in fines, according to your counsel. You are still using the facility. And when you reply that we're in the process of changing, that process of changing can be done in a week when you were in violation. Instead, it's 4 months, and we're hearing you're in process. Well, by the time you're done in process and our clock runs out, then, in my view, it will become moot, and you need not vacate anymore because it'll become legal, and there's something wrong with that. And what's really troubling to me is the borough president is enthusiastic about the idea of additional parking in the area to relieve what are critical needs. But at the same time, I don't believe the borough president is gonna condone the kind of, the kind of activities that you guys have done. I just don't understand it. I'm curious as to what your comments are regarding.
My comment is the lot will be completely vacated by the end of next week. We will go through the process, we will work with the tenant, and it'll be padlocked.
Okay.
Ms. Efron?
Is there a lease on the parking lot, or is the parking contractual in the lease for the logistics company?
It's an interesting question. It's both.
Could you be more specific?
Yes, I can. Parking lot is owned by Idolots LLC. It is leased to JFK Airport Park Partners, which is the owner of what was a building in poor condition that we purchased from Prologis, Inc., or whatever Prologis' correct name is. In one of the leases in that building with Markin Limited, who is an international biologics transporter and laboratory, they have the right to use that lot as spillover parking, should the other parking at the building not be adequate for their needs.
So you entered into a lease for space that was not the use of the space. When was that lease entered into?
I believe it was entered into in May of 2015. They didn't take occupancy till, I believe it would be December.
Of 2015?
Yes, November. I don't have those exact dates at my fingertips.
Well, it certainly elucidates a lot of the timeline of the application.
Excuse me?
It certainly elucidates, at least for me, a lot of the timeline of the application.
But just as an aside, Markin had previously leased, that building was, that section of the building was about 22,000 or 20,000 square feet, 17,000 square feet approximately on the ground floor, which we divided between them and an international freight forwarder. They relocated that warehouse space, which they used to transport tissues, laboratory specimens. I'm not sure if they're transporting organs, but that's their business. And they were using the warehouse section and a small section of office space behind it. They then made a corporate decision. They're based in London and their US headquarters are in North Carolina, to relocate their New York office from RXR Plaza, which is one of the more prominent buildings in Nassau County. It's a AAA office building on the Meadowbrook Parkway in Uniondale. So they then asked to lease office space, which had just become vacant on the second floor of this building, about 3,000 square feet, where they moved in strictly office tenants, office workers, and they had then consolidated their New York operation at this location. Big difference from, a AAA office building in Nassau County to come to 226th Street in Springfield Gardens, but we made it attractive for them with a lot of landscaping, and we had really spruced up that building.
Mr. Dweck?
Going back to Commissioner Delauz's comments and question, should the zoning change take place to a C22, there's no restriction from you converting it in the future from a parking lot. So can you give me the timeline or the length of the lease that's in place right now that would encumber it from being converted to a commercial space?
Well, I don't really understand when you say length of lease. I believe Markin's lease is for 7 years. I believe, and I'd like to confirm with my counsel, haven't we certified or represented and warranted that this property will be used only as a parking lot? At one point in time, someone was talking about a deed restriction, which we agreed that we would do. We have no intentions or ideas of building anything on the site.
Okay, I'm just not sure of the enforcement mechanisms on the deed restriction, so perhaps that might be an option. In this case, I should say, so. Thank you.
Ms. Levin?
So the lease with Markin, does it obligate you to provide a certain number of parking spaces?
Yes.
And what's the number?
I don't recall, but a lot of their parking is on an on-site parking lot on 226th Street. This is specifically designated as spillover parking. What they can't use on-site, or if they choose to park on the street, they park on this site.
Can all of their parking need be accommodated on site?
Some days, depending on the activity at the building. We're gonna have to work out a plan between other property which we own in the vicinity to accommodate this spillover parking.
Did you acquire this lot separately from the foreclosure?
Yes, we acquired, this is the timeline of the acquisitions. The first thing we acquired was the 106,000 square foot lot, which is block 13475, lot 16, which was the derelict warehouse. And that was the foreclosure. The next thing we acquired was, let me show you over here.
That's,
This is the first thing that we acquired. This was the foreclosure. The next thing we acquired in 2012 was this building, which is a multi-tenant air freight logistics building. This is
sir, I believe you need to speak into the microphone because it's
sorry.
not just for us, but it's
I'm sorry.
that these hearings
I'm
are
sorry.
publicly available online.
This is the building that we acquired, or the site that we acquired via foreclosure in 2010. This is the building, these two buildings were acquired in 2012 from Prologis, along with these two parking lots over here. And this is a multi-tenant air freight logistics building, and this is a building which is leased to Verizon for a long
Okay,
period
and
of
where's
time.
Markin? Markin is the outfit that
Ma-
has the
Ma-
right to
Ma-
use the,
Markin is in this section of this building.
okay, and when did you acquire the lot that we're talking about today?
2014, I believe, in the
So,
summer.
The last piece.
Yes, and we also
And were you
acquired-
aware when you purchased it that, or acquired it, that it could only be used for residential use?
Yes,
And what was your plan for that?
to rezone the lot to use it for parking.
Well, it sounds like you started using it as a parking lot before you went around rezoning it.
I said that and apologized for that, yes. We were too eager and we made a judgment error.
Okay. How many spaces are you obligated to, as I understand it, it's Markin that has the right to use that lot?
For spillover parking,
Is there a designated number of spaces that are to be in that lot? In the lease between you and Markin?
I believe it's 24, up to 24.
Up to 24. Okay.
But it will be on now on a first-come, first-served basis.
Okay, how's that going to work? What time of day do the workers, do the Markin employees come to work?
Typically between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, it's been represented to us that this might also, well, it has to be publicly open, but that the main users would also be related accessory to the commercial space that's nearby. Those stores don't open at 7 o'clock in the morning.
They're not stores. What do you mean? I don't understand you.
Is it realistic that the public will be able to park in
Yes,
this lot?
the-
Or will it, in fact, be fully occupied
No.
by market employees because they'll get there first?
No, that will not be the case because we have been counting the activity in this lot, and it's never really exceeded a dozen vehicles at any one time. So there will be another dozen spaces that will be available to the public.
Other questions? I have several questions, Mr. Ross. First, you and/or your partner were aware of the application as it was filed with us?
Yes,
And you knew at that time that the application was not accurate?
I believe when it was filed, it was accurate. It became inaccurate after it was filed.
And you didn't see fit to correct that?
I guess that was an error of judgment.
Indeed. And once it came to your attention that this was illegal and violations were filed over the past 4 months, you just continued to operate it. That was also just an error of judgment, or what?
I would have to say it is.
Um,
We wanted to go before the community boards and Borough President's office to make our presentations while this was going on.
But didn't see fit to close the lot down while you were doing it, even though you had violations that were filed and being prosecuted.
No,
The lease with Markin started in when 2000. Or did you just assume that lease when ProLogic
no,
took over?
no, not at all. This entire 22,000 square foot section of the building became vacant. And we re-rented it to, over a struggling period of time financially, and we re-rented it to, and we relocated an existing tenant who needed more space. And Markin was brought to us by a broker from another building by the airport. And then Markin, after this, decided to relocate their office facilities from Uniondale, Nassau County, to the upstairs portion of this space.
And when was that exactly?
That lease was signed in the summer of 2015.
And you acquired this lot when? The lot in question?
We acquired the lot in the summer of 2014.
And when you entered into the lease with Markin, at that time, you were obligated to provide the spillover parking to Markin?
Yes.
Was that just part of the lease, or is there a separate rent that you get for providing the parking?
No, that's part of the lease.
The space in question, which is now being used, is open to everybody. Is there a charge for that space? Anyone can just park there for free?
Right now, there's no charge.
And what's the
The only people that are parking there are these Markin vehicles.
It's not open currently to the general public. It will be open to the general public in the future, assuming this application is approved?
Yes,
And at that point, you will charge for this space?
yes,
And that charge will be applicable to the mark-in spillover vehicles as well?
no,
So they can park there for free, but everyone else is going to have to pay?
yes.
Mr. Cirillo?
So just as a follow-up to a variety of questions that were asked, how do you ensure compliance with the lease terms if the lot is used and full by people other than the lessee, who you have an obligation to provide overflow for, since now this will be a public parking lot?
They will have to find alternative parking if they don't get there on a first come, first served basis. However, based on our visual observations of the use of the parking lot, we don't anticipate this to be a problem.
And how, if it is a public lot, and let's assume that part of the reason the community, through its elected officials and the community board, supports the application, even under the circumstances, because there's the opportunity for the public to actually access the lot for the purposes that it would access the lot. But there's no guarantee that even the public would have access to the lot if the Markin employees or whoever else would access the lot could get there first. I'm just trying to figure out how, if under the lease you had an obligation to provide parking, which of course it's understandable therefore why the parking lot was created, to meet the lease terms, even though it was put in a place where it couldn't be at the time. But there's no guarantee you can fulfill the lease terms, then why didn't it just happen at the time it could happen? Why, and is the community aware that basically this could be used specifically for the business purpose that the lease is entered into for versus the public, because we're calling it public parking, which it may not actually be?
Well, we will put a guard hut there, guard post, with an attendant that will deal with the inflow of parking. And that's the way it will be monitored. As I said, based on the current utilization, Markin never seems to have more than a dozen vehicles in the lot at any one time. Given the fact that the lot will be reconfigured to have 24 spots, there should always be approximately a dozen spots available for the public.
Okay, you referred to the piece of the relationship for the parking to this space as overflow parking.
Yes.
Where's the principal parking?
There is a parking lot right here.
Okay. And how many spots does that provide? For?
Approximately 54 for the entire building. Some of the tenants park inside their loading docks. They leave their trucks inside the loading docks. There is parking. The employees do go in and out during the day in the normal course of business. There is also parking on the streets where some of the people park for convenience.
And is that principal parking area, it's not just for Markin
No, this is,
Employees.
this parking lot is for this entire lot, entire 60,000 square foot building right here.
And the overflow is only for market?
The overflow is only for market. No other tenant in this building has a contractual lease right to use it.
And it's an open parking at the principal lot? It's not that one tenant has X number of spots?
No, it's open parking, it's fenced in, and gated, though the gates aren't closed. We do hear that there are some people from the neighborhood that park there illegally over the weekends, but we take no action to remedy that situation because of our relationship with the community.
So with the other tenants, in the event, just as an example, all the market employees show up first at work and park in the principal parking, and all 54 spots are taken by market employees, in my example. The other tenants, if they went to go to the new lot, they would have to pay.
That's correct.
Ms. Efron?
I believe you responded to Commissioner Levin by saying that you thought the lease obligation was for 24 spots. And as the application proposes, there would be 24 spots
Can I just look
available.
at something? I think I can give you a specific answer on that.
Well, it may be helpful to hear my whole question through, if that's
Okay, I'm sorry.
As Commissioner Cerullo pointed out, there's no way to know who would get there first, whether it's your market employees or residents of the community. So my question is, how is this a public lot if your contractual obligation, as you've just put it to Commissioner Cerullo, is for 24 cars, and there are 24 spaces would be available in that lot?
Can I please look at one piece of paper and I'll give you a better answer?
I guess so.
That is correct. It's up to 24 spots.
So my question stands. If you're contractually obligated to provide 24 spots, the space has 24 spots, how is that public parking?
As I said, I've been surveying the utilization of the lot, and there's never been more than a dozen vehicles in there at any one time.
But let's assume the residents take up 23 spots, and your tenant needs more than that one spot.
I would have a problem.
Ms. Delos?
Not to prolong the torture too much longer, but I guess, have you considered negotiating cancellation of the obligation given the circumstances requiring this to be a public lot?
I'm not following your question with,
It seems like I don't understand how you can be contractually obligated to provide parking in a public lot once the lot is a public lot legally in the future.
I am not a lawyer. I really can't answer that question. We have a lease obligation.
People negotiate, there's been a change in circumstances, or change in understanding of the circumstances. It seems to me most leases have clauses that indicate that if there's something underlying that changes the legality of the contract, that it can often be renegotiated. I would ask that you consult with counsel to see if it's possible, this questioning going back and forth, and I'm not an attorney, but it just seems like, how can you have a lease obligation on something that you can't necessarily guarantee? And it seems like something that should be answered as part of this process.
As I said, I'm not an attorney. I can't answer that. That would require,
I ask you to follow up with counsel and get back to us.
I will.
Mr. Dwyer?
Just a follow-up question. What are the hours of operation for the parking lot?
I would have to say 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Markin does store some vans overnight in the parking lot.
Perhaps maybe the community would benefit if they had overnight parking spaces that were available to them, that could be accessed, and that would certainly be a benefit that, you know, not having to circle the block looking for a parking when you get home and you can leave it overnight till the morning would probably be an inducement to understand better the benefits to the community. So if something you can look at would be, from my perspective, would be appreciated.
Okay?
Mr. Cantor.
You or your organization made a presentation to the Community Planning Board?
Yes, we did, local Community Board 13.
And did the subject of the lease versus the word public parking come up at all?
I don't believe that it did.
Thank you.
You know, Mr. Ross, you can tell, this whole process has been deeply disturbing in many, many ways. And when this was first brought to your attention and your council's attention, we received a letter of apology from your council, and we received a letter of explanation from your partner. And that letter said that the basis for going forward with improving this lot was due to a desire to improve the environment in the area, and made absolutely no mention of the lease obligation whatsoever. This is just furtherance of the question that Mr. Cantor asked. And in fact said that the purpose was to reduce congestion in the neighborhood and to reserve on-street parking for residents. And it's really disturbing that not only did this start out in the manner it did, but once this was brought to your attention, and your partner's attention, and your lawyer's attention, you just blithely continued as if it didn't much matter. And I think that's just a disturbing element of this, at least for me. Any other questions for Mr. Ross? Thank you, Mr. Ross.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this particular matter? If not, this hearing is closed. I will note that we have in the audience today several master's students from real estate development program at NYU, and I hope you found this an edifying hearing regarding development, what to do and what not to do. Thank you all. Madam Secretary, is there any other matter to come before us today?
No, Chairman Weisbrod.
With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.